This is scandalous. We invested that much money into another country's manufacturing regime and not into our own.
Chinese espionage in Silicon Valley. How prevalent is that over there?
There are more spies in Washington, D.C. than any other city in America, and number 2 is Silicon Valley. Venture capital firms that are very large and very successful went into China, and they trained them as though they were, training their own associates in Silicon Valley. Like, why didn't we do that for the state of Ohio?
China was setting up all these brothels. They would lure people in from government agencies that fall in love with this prostitute that's a spy. Next thing you know, they're telling them secrets. He goes, this sounds just like Silicon Valley. I mean, how quickly has that shifted back to the U.S.?
On the manufacturing side, when we talk about what keeps me up at night, it is really, really hard to build factories that compete with the manufacturing and production capabilities of China. And again, this started 10, 15 years ago with Apple, but there's many good examples of, companies that were invested in by American venture capital firms in China that, are way ahead in terms of production. I always say the biggest scandal, Apple is a good example of us taking our knowledge and our know-how into China and teaching them something that was an American secret in many cases. But the biggest scandal of Silicon Valley is that Silicon Valley did that too. In 2008, 2009, venture capital firms that, are very large and very successful went into China, and they taught them how to do early stage investing. The simple overview I gave of how venture capital works, they went in there and they trained people, and they trained them as though they were, training their own associates in Silicon Valley. And they told them how you build these companies. And so, I always say that, the sort of venture capital ecosystem, it is American dynamism. It is the thing that allows America to be dominant in the global economy. It's how we build tech companies. And we just went over there as venture capitalists. And I shouldn't say we, because it wasn't my firm, it wasn't me, but VCs went over there and shared information, shared limited partners, shared all of the aspects and the functions of how you build an incredible, legacy-defining venture firm. And over 20 years, Silicon Valley or China has a true ecosystem of tech companies now, and they all work with the CCP, right? They figured out, how to build in the kind of confines of how China expects them to build. But this is scandalous. I think it's Apple in China is scandalous that we invested that much money into another country's manufacturing regime and not into our own. Why didn't we do that for the state of Ohio? Why didn't we do that in the state of Florida? What was it about America that Apple didn't want to invest in our own manufacturing capabilities 15 years ago so that they can make 500,000 iPhones in a day? And so that I think is the thing that's going to be hard to overcome. Now it's happening on the defense side because you have to manufacture in the U.S. and there is this, manufacture where you are. But I think it's the thing that keeps me up at night is the production gap.
Man, we talked a little bit about Chinese espionage in Silicon Valley at breakfast this morning. And how prevalent is that over there?
It's pretty prevalent. From what I've heard from people I know, inside the DoD and various agencies, there are more spies in Washington, D.C. than any other city in America, and number 2 is Silicon Valley.
Man.
And of course, it's mostly Chinese spies. But there's been a lot of stories recently. There's things that happen where it's clear, it's clear espionage, right? It's clearly there's spies that are in big companies stealing. The last 30 years of Silicon Valley, how has China caught up so quickly? It's, of course, a lot of these people are stealing the secrets out of the companies and stealing the intellectual property and taking it back. So that's a known story. I think the areas that are even, more shocking are how the universities play into this, how, there was a story actually in the Stanford Review, which is a student paper at Stanford, that was saying there are known agents on, basically spies in Stanford campus that are either professors or working with professors where they are, stealing AI secrets from Stanford. And that's happening across, I think all of our great, university systems. Anyone that has serious knowledge, the Chinese have been very good at infiltrating those systems. I also think the thing that's sort of misunderstood about Silicon Valley is because it's such an open culture, anyone can come and anyone can sort of, have a coffee and learn about things and kind of infiltrate the culture. And so there is also this cultural aspect in Silicon Valley where I was sharing, in like 2015, 2016, when I was, more open about that I was, investing in deep tech and different things. I would always get these emails from like, random, Chinese venture capitalists. It happens less now, but like Chinese venture capitalists who had a small venture capital firm and, they were from China and like you didn't know where the money was from, but they were really interested in your companies and they wanted to learn more. And the DoD was very worried about that because they were worried about, CFIUS concerns, Chinese capital getting on the cap tables of these important companies. But it was more like the bigger danger was it was more of just like completely infiltrating the culture, which is what's happened in Silicon Valley, where you can't really divorce, a lot of tech culture from, that sort of that. They understand tech culture. They're there. They're completely part of it. And so, it's something where I think we need much, much better security around a lot of these AI projects in particular, a lot of these AI companies. It's clear that they're being targeted for espionage purposes. It's clear that like, how did the Chinese catch up so quickly? It's like this is again a whole of society sort of project for them. And Silicon Valley, like this, I'd say it's sort of a Pollyanna view. Sort of this, well, we're sort of this open, we're this open ecosystem and, anyone can come here and build. And again, it's part of the reason why it works is like you have an open society where anyone takes a phone call and you get people like me who know nothing about it and they can infiltrate it. But if you're working on behalf of a foreign government, it's not easy for nobody to infiltrate it with no resources, right? How easy is it for someone who's been trained to infiltrate a society, to infiltrate a company or infiltrate an ecosystem to be able to capture the intelligence they need? Like it is a very easy target.
Man, I told you this at breakfast, but I mean, we were having a conversation at lunch with one of the guys that I had on the show, a tech guy, and we were talking about finding a wife or something like that, and somehow this spun up. I'd brought up that China was setting up all these brothels all over the Middle East when I was there, and they would lure people in from state and all these other government agencies that fall in love with this, prostitute that's a spy, and the next thing you know, they're telling them secrets and they're on camera and all these other things. And he had said this sounds just like Silicon Valley. He's like, you'll get like these beautiful Russian women or Chinese women that come in and they'll find the startup guys or whoever is making it big. And you got a tech guy that's normally in his basement that's probably never been with a woman before. And now he's with a 10 and get married, become whatever. And there goes all the secrets, and he said that was so prevalent. It's almost like a running joke.
Yeah. Well, I think
inside Silicon Valley, it's like, oh yeah, I mean, she's Russian, like, you know what that is. Yeah. But he just made it sound like it was very common for that kind of stuff to happen.
Yeah. I think, there's the famous sort of economic security is national security. You hear that all the time in Washington. And it really is like, technological supremacy is national security. And so if you really believe that, and Xi Jinping has said this, Vladimir Putin said this, like he who owns AI will own the world, right? If you really believe that, like, why wouldn't you be infiltrating every single one of our major research labs? Like, why wouldn't you, be just maniacally focused on getting this information out of people? And if you've already set up a 30-year ecosystem where, it's sort of a, it's been very easy for Chinese researchers to come to Stanford or Berkeley or places like that. And it's been, very, very easy for the universities have taken funding. I mean, they have, I can't remember the name, but like Stanford got in a lot of trouble for having this sort of center devoted to Chinese cultural understanding and different things. And it was clearly funded by the CCP. And the universities say, oh, well, that's just, it's fine. We're taking capital for Chinese cultural understanding. It's like, what do you think that's actually being used for? These are sort of the soft power games and the espionage games that can, over a 30-year period have a striking impact on a culture.
I mean, how widely known is that? I mean, I got to be honest. That was one of the things that I was really disappointed in with Trump recently is the negotiation over the tariffs with China. I mean, we came to a settlement. I've heard about Chinese being embedded in our educational institutions for a long time. And part of the deal was, yep, we're still going to take Chinese
Yeah.
and put them in our
Yeah.
Ivy League schools.
Well, I think there's arguments. The Silicon Valley argument for it is it's like the golden visa, right? Like it's sort of like what happened after, the fall of Nazi Germany, and we took the entire sort of, physicist class and like all of the great engineers, and they made up our space program. Like that's sort of the argument is, if you can get all of these exceptional engineers working in American companies, if you can get them at American universities, a lot of them stay and they're brilliant, then they're working on American interests. And that's the argument that a lot of people make when they say, we can't cut off immigration from other countries because you want to take, Palmer says this too. It's like you want to just gut other countries and you want to take their talent so that they can't operate. I think the problem is that it's so widespread and everyone, there's no way to defend against it, that these large companies, particularly the Apples of the world, Google, it's like, there are just repeat cases consistently of people stealing intellectual property, and just the security around these important things just not being, no one's paying attention to it. And I think that the bigger problem is, whenever I go to DC, there was a really good quote that DC people would say, which is like, when we look at China in Washington, we think China is our adversary. When Silicon Valley looks at China, they think China is my customer. And until very recently, that was true, right? Like it was very true that, every company wanted to go into China. They wanted to, they wanted to sell around the world, right? Like it was sort of this global phenomena. China can help me. I can learn a lot from China. I can manufacture in China. I can potentially sell to China, even though China doesn't like American companies, right? Like I think in some ways that was sort of, again, a Pollyanna-ish view. It was sort of a stupid view because, China was protecting its own. But it is only recently that Silicon Valley at all looks at China as a potential threat or adversary. Again, 2 years ago, American venture capital firms were investing in China, and they were investing in AI companies in China. There are still American venture capital firms that are investing in Chinese AI companies. Jeez. And that's legal. Like that's legal. That's not breaking any American laws. And to me, it's like that's can be a weapon of war. How are American investors allowed to invest in these companies?
That's crazy. No matter where you're watching Shawn Ryan Show from, if you get anything out of this, please like, comment, subscribe, and most importantly, share this everywhere you possibly can. And if you're feeling extra generous, please leave us a review on Apple and Spotify podcasts.